Welcome back to another tutorial. So today we're going to be talking about two-dimensional arrays. So on the right here you can see I have my example 2D array. The main difference between one-dimensional and two-dimensional arrays is that in 2D you're going to have both rows which extend horizontally and columns which extend vertically. So this array, it has an equal number of rows and columns. It has 5 rows and 5 columns too. So I'm just going to point out which one is a row and which one's a column. Your row is going to extend in this direction. This is row. And your column is going to extend in this direction. This is your column. Alright. So let's get started, and we're going to begin by declaring a 2D array in Java. The first thing that you need to do is declare the type. So every 2D array can only store a specific type of values. So in this one, I only want to store integer values, which means whole numbers. So I've written int here. Next is my array name, which is R, and I'm just going to write that here. Name is R, and then type is int. Alright, and then we have 2 square brackets here, which means that this is for a 2D array. And finally here you can see that I've written the row number first, the number of rows. So this basically means number of rows followed by the number of columns beside it. Alright, so if we want to find the length of the number of rows, we're going to get 5. And if we want to find the length of columns, we're going to get 5 too, since this has 5 columns and 5 rows. Alright then, now we're going to be talking about how to take an input into the array. Like before, there are a total of 3 ways by which you can take inputs. So the first thing that you can do is take a direct input. For example, R of 3 and then 2 is equal to 0. So what this means is that in the array 2D array R, in row number 3, which is this row here, and in column number 2, which basically means this position, I want to store the number 0. Alright, so I've stored the number 0 in 3, 2. Now if I want to take inputs into every single space of the array, I can simply use my for loop, which I've also used for my 1D array. So let's see how the for loop works here. So for int row is equal to 0. So you're going to have to loop twice for 2D arrays. The first time you're going to be looping for rows, and the second time you're going to be looping for columns. So for int row equal to 0, row is going to be less than r.length and row plus plus. Alright, I'm going to add a small annotation here. What r.length returns is 5. So this is basically the row number. Alright, so this r.length here, it's going to be 5 because we've declared our array as having 5 rows. Alright then, next we're going to be looping for columns. So same thing. For int col is equal to 0, remember that every single index of an array, whether it's 2D, 1D or 3D, will always start from 0. Col is less than r of 0.length. You'll notice that I've made a slight change here, because for 2D arrays you can get the column length, which means the number of columns, the total number of columns, using the array name of 0 dot length. Alright? And for rows, to get the total number of rows, you use r dot length. And for columns, you're going to be using r of 0 dot length. So the annotation I'm going to make here is r of 0 dot length is equal to 5 here too, because I've declared it with 5 columns. And then I'm just going to take a normal input. So r, alright, let's make that black again. R of row and col is equal to str.next int. I've used the scanner library to take inputs, and there we have it. We've learned how to take inputs into a 2D array using a for loop. So this was the second way, the second method of taking inputs. There is a third way of taking inputs into an array. We can just, directly take the input while declaring the array, like we saw in our first tutorial, Introduction to 1D Arrays. So let's do that to see what happens. Now you'll notice that, like before, we haven't mentioned any specific length, because we're just going to, we're going to identify the values here too, directly. Now, what this basically means, this bracketed 1, 2, 3, 4 followed by 3, 4, 6, 9, is that I've created a 2D array. It has a total of 2 rows and it has 4 columns. All right. So this 2D array has 2 rows and 4 columns. I'm just going to write that down. Alright, we're just going to write that down here. Has 2 rows and 4 columns. Alright? And from the first index to the last one, the values are like so. So in the 0, 0 index, we're going to have 1. And in 0, 1, we're going to have 2. In 0, 2, we're going to have 3. And you get the point, right? So this is basically, declaring an array and inputting values without any for loop or anything whatsoever. This is the direct method, the easiest method. Alright, so this was how to declare an array and take an input in Java. And now we're going to be taking a look at a piece of code that involves 2D arrays. So here is my basic Java program. Okay, so let's start off by declaring a 2D array. So I want an array of type int. I want to name it R, and it's going to be 2D. So I've given 2 brackets. And I want it to have a total of 3 rows. Alright, and I want it to have 2 columns. So the number of rows and the number of columns, it doesn't have to be equal, okay? So there we go. Now we're just going to take an input. So for int row is equal to 0. Row is less than r dot length, and then row plus plus. Then we're going to have another for loop for int col is equal to 0. Col is less than r of 0 dot length. Col plus plus. And now we're going to take the input. So r row then col is equal to str.nextInt. Alright, okay, so I have to import my scanner. And I have to declare my scanner here. Okay then, so we've taken our input, and now let's run a for loop so that our program outputs all of the even numbers in our array. So for, it's just going to be the same thing. I'm just going to copy and paste it there. And we're just going to have a small even checking statement. If R of row, then col, then we know how to check for even numbers. We have to use our mod sign, is equal to 0. Then what we're going to do is system dot out dot print ln this number, or we don't have to do that either. We're just going to print that number. R row col. Alright, so we have our program here. In this part, we've taken inputs into our array. Our array has 3 rows and 2 columns. And so it can take a total of, 6 values. And in this part, it's going to print the values in the array, which are even. Alright, so now we're just going to run our code. Let's see how it goes. Alright then, so now we're going to be taking inputs. So I want 3, 4, 2, 8, 10, and finally I want 1. Alright, so our outputs are 4, 2, 8, 10. So if I extend the interactions pane, I took 6 numbers as input into my 2D array, and among them 4 were even, 4, 2, 8, 10, and they have been printed as follows. So I hope that you've all understood the concept of 2D arrays. If you have any questions at all, feel free just to leave a comment in the comment section. Thank you.